How much bandwidth do you actually need on a mobile proxy? It is the single most common question I get, and almost everyone guesses wrong in one of two expensive directions. They either panic and buy a giant plan they never come close to using, or they buy the smallest one, run dry in the first week, and end up topping up at the worst possible price. This video fixes that. By the end, you will be able to size a plan to your real workload instead of guessing. I run a hardware proxy farm here in Singapore, real phones on Singtel, M1, and StarHub. I watch customers buy the wrong amount of data constantly, and the painful part is that it is almost always avoidable. The number you need is not a mystery. It comes straight from what you are actually doing, and once you can see where the gigabytes go, the right plan becomes obvious. So let me show you how the data actually gets spent. Here is the plan. First, why mobile proxies are built by data at all, because that framing matters. Then the real things that burn bandwidth, ranked from worst to harmless. Then how to estimate your own usage before you pay. Then what actually happens when you run out, and how to avoid the trap of emergency top-ups. And finally, who genuinely needs a big plan and who is wasting money on one. Start with why bandwidth is even the unit. A mobile proxy is a real phone on a real carrier, and that carrier charges for data. Every page you load, every image, every video, every request flows through that SIM and counts against a real mobile data allowance. So when a provider sells you a plan, the gigabytes are not an arbitrary limit. They are the actual data your traffic pushes through a physical phone. That is why mobile is priced by the gig and not unlimited like a home line. Someone is paying a carrier for every byte. Now the thing that matters most, bandwidth is not about how long you use the proxy. It is about what kind of traffic you send through it. Two people can both run a proxy all day and one uses half a gig while the other burns 40. The difference is entirely in what they are loading, so forget hours. Think about payload, the actual weight of what passes through the tunnel. The single biggest burner by a mile is video and media. If anything you do streams video, loads heavy image galleries, or scrolls an endless feed full of auto-playing clips, your data evaporates. A few minutes of video can outweigh hours of plain text work. So if your task involves watching, scrolling a media-heavy app, or anything that plays sound and motion, assume you will use a lot and size up accordingly. The second burner is loading full, modern web pages at scale. A single rich page today is not a little text. It is megabytes of scripts, fonts, images, and trackers. Load a few hundred of those in a scraping job and the gigabytes add up fast, even though no single page felt heavy. This is where people underestimate the most because each page seems small and the total quietly balloons. The third category is the light one, and it is most account work. Logging into an account, posting text, sending messages, managing a profile, checking a dashboard. That is mostly small requests and very little media, so it sips data rather than gulping it. If your whole use is running a handful of accounts and doing normal actions on them, you need far less bandwidth than the big plans assume. People doing exactly this routinely overbuy by a huge margin. So how do you estimate your own number before paying? The honest answer is to measure, not guess, and a trial is the cleanest way to do it. Run your real task on a small plan or a trial for a day or two, then look at how much you actually used. Multiply that daily figure out to a month and you have a real number grounded in your own work, not a provider's scary marketing math. One measured day beats a week of guessing. If you cannot trial first, estimate by category. If your work is text and account actions, start small, because you will likely stay well under a modest plan. If it is heavy scraping of rich pages, plan for a lot more and watch it closely in the first week. If it touches video or media at all, assume the high end from the start because nothing else burns data like motion does. When unsure, it is cheaper to start a size down and top up than to buy huge and waste it, as long as your provider lets you add data fairly. That brings up what actually happens when you run out, because this is where people get hurt. On most providers, hitting your cap either stops the proxy cold until you top up or quietly throttles you to a crawl. Neither is fun to discover in the middle of a job. The real trap is the emergency top-up, where you run dry mid-month and pay a premium rate to add data right now because you have no choice. That panic gigabyte is always the most expensive one you will ever buy. The way to avoid that is simple discipline. Know your daily burn from your trial, watch your usage in the dashboard in the first week against that number, and if you are trending high, deal with it early and calmly rather than at midnight when the line is dead. A good provider shows you your usage clearly and lets you add data at a fair price without drama. If yours hides usage or makes a top-up feel like a hostage situation, that tells you something about the provider, not about you. There is one more factor that quietly changes your number, and that is sticky versus rotating connections. Rotation itself does not burn meaningful data, but the behavior around it can. If your tool re-establishes sessions constantly, reloads pages from scratch on every new address, and re-downloads the same heavy assets again and again instead of reusing them, you pay for all of that repetition in bandwidth. Holding a sticky session for a task that needs to finish in one place is often not just safer for the account, it is lighter on data too. So who actually needs a big plan? If you scrape rich pages at volume, touch any video or media, or run many heavy tasks in parallel, yes, buy real headroom, because you will use it and running dry mid-job is worse than a slightly bigger bill. But if you run a handful of accounts, post text, manage profiles, and do normal human actions, you almost certainly need far less than you think, and the giant plan is just money sitting unused. Match the plan to the payload, not to your anxiety. Let me put rough numbers on it so it stops being abstract, and treat these as ballpark, not promises, because every workload differs. Running a handful of accounts doing text posts, messages, and profile checks might use only a giga or two across a whole month, because almost nothing you send has weight. Scraping rich modern web pages, on the other hand, can run you a gig for every few thousand pages, once you count all the scripts and images each one drags along. And anything with video is in its own universe, where an hour of scrolling and autoplaying feed can burn more than a week of that account work. Same proxy, wildly different appetite, entirely because of payload. So the first thing to pin down is honestly which of those three buckets your real work falls into, because that single answer moves your number by an order of magnitude. You will also see mobile proxies advertised as unlimited, and it is worth understanding what that usually means. Truly unlimited mobile data is expensive to provide, because a real carrier sits underneath it charging for every byte. So when unlimited is cheap, it almost always comes with a catch, either a hard speed cap once you pass a hidden threshold, or heavy oversubscription where so many customers share each phone that nobody gets real throughput. Unlimited on paper and unusable in practice is a common trap. A clear, honest gigabyte allowance you can actually use is often better than an unlimited plan that crawls the moment you lean on it. If you find yourself using more than you expected, there are real ways to cut it before you just buy more. In a scraping or automation tool, you can often block images, video, fonts, and trackers from loading at all, which can cut the data per page dramatically when you only need the text. Reusing a session instead of reloading a site from scratch every time saves re-downloading the same heavy assets over and over. And caching what does not change means you pay for it once instead of on every pass. A little tuning here often turns a plan that felt too small into one with room to spare. One thing to get straight when you run more than one line is whether your bandwidth is per line or pooled. With pooled data, all your proxies draw from one shared allowance, which is flexible because a quiet line leaves more for a busy one. With per line limits, each proxy has its own cap and a heavy task on one line cannot borrow from another. Neither is wrong, but they size very differently, so know which model you are buying before you split a number across several lines and find one of them starved. Let me save you the mistakes I see most. 1. buying a giant plan for light account work and paying every month for data you never touch. 2. Buying the smallest plan for heavy scraping and running dry in week 1. 3. Never watching usage until the proxy suddenly stops. 4. Letting a tool stream video or load full media when you only needed the page text. And 5. Getting cornered into a panic top-up at a premium rate when a calm look at the dashboard 3 days earlier would have caught it. Here is the whole thing in one breath. Bandwidth is real carrier data, so it is billed by the gig. What you send matters far more than how long you run. Video and heavy pages burn it, plain account work barely touches it. Measure your real usage on a trial, project it to a month, and size from there. Start a notch smaller and top up calmly rather than overbuying out of fear, and never let yourself get cornered into a panic top up at midnight. If you want to measure your own real usage before committing to anything, there is a free trial of Singapore Mobile Proxy, real SIMs on Singtel, M1 and StarHub, with a dashboard that shows your data clearly so you can see exactly what your workload burns in a day. Run your real task on it, read the number, and size your plan from evidence instead of a guess. The link is in the description and it points to the home page so you can start there. If this saved you from buying the wrong plan, subscribe, because the next video breaks down how many separate proxies and lines you actually need for multi-account work, which is the other place people overspend. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next one.